So let me ask you, when was the last time that you sought and actually responded to feedback? Was it from a boss or a teacher or maybe a partner, somebody like that, a friend? Well, maybe that was the case, but let me ask you this. Did you look in the mirror this morning before heading out? Well, that was feedback. How am I looking? Is this right? The hair, all that good stuff. That's feedback to see whether or not we're on the right track. Did you look at your speedometer while driving? That's feedback. Or maybe testing your coffee to, see how hot it is before you took that first big gulp. The fact is, we are constantly seeking after and responding to feedback on a daily basis. So when you think about it that way, you would think that seeking after and amending our behavior based on feedback would be pretty easy, that we would actually seek after it and enjoy it. But that's not really the case, is it? Sometimes feedback can really sting. In fact, just darn right cut us to the quick. If we don't know how to really respond properly to feedback, it can really mess up our lives and careers. And so that's why we want to talk about it today. Now, in our earlier episode, we talked about how to give good quality critical feedback, one that would inspire action on the part of the receiver of that feedback. Well, feedback is a two-way street, so we need to talk about how to receive it as well. And so in this video, I'm going to give you the 8 tips to receiving and processing feedback. Because by doing this, we're going to be able to better develop our careers, our skills, and our relationships. All the things that are really important to living a happy, thriving life. Now that's me, but what about you? How do you feel about feedback? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And while you're there, be sure to hit the subscribe and notification buttons. That way you'll never miss an episode. And as always, we're going to be talking about a lot of important concepts, so I've included some additional resources down in the description. All right, so tip number 1, be open to feedback. After all, learning is all about identifying and correcting errors, and feedback is an absolute necessary element in that process. If we're not open to feedback, then we close ourselves off to opportunities to learn and grow. In his rather weird book, all his books are weird, Invisible Monsters, Chuck Palahniuk wrote, "Nothing of me is original. I am the combined effort of everybody I've ever known." Now, just so you know, it's a Chuck Palahniuk book, and he's the guy who wrote Fight Club, so take it for what it's worth. But actually, I really buy into this idea. We're all the product of our combined experiences from when we were little children to this very moment. And in fact, if we're honest with ourselves, most of the experiences that really taught us, formed us, made us who we are, were pretty tough. The easy stuff doesn't really move us that much. And so feedback, yes, can be difficult to process, but it's important and valuable. Okay, tip number 2, listen to understand, not to refute. Now, let me give you an example of what I'm talking about here. One time I was teaching a class and a student challenged me saying, "When am I ever going to use this information?" Now, you know what? That's a pretty typical challenge, and I totally could have said, "Hey, listen, it's a general education class. You need to have it so you can be a well-rounded Renaissance human being and be an informed citizen and interesting at cocktail parties." Whatever. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm a fan of general education, but had I simply responded in that way, I would have been deflecting his question, his feedback. Now, we're going to talk more about deflection here, but the idea is you want to listen to understand what the person is saying, not simply to try to figure out, well, how am I going to respond and refute the feedback? So as a result, I said, listen, stick with the class. I promise it's going to get there. I'll show you how these things connect to the real world. And he said, okay, I'll give it a chance. Well, I got busy, okay? I went back to my office and I really looked at the material, I looked at the curriculum, and over the course of the semester, I worked really hard to make sure there was a good connection between theory and application. And so what was the result? Well, let's look at the feedback he gave the college at the end of the semester. He said, "I questioned the course material early in the semester. I regret that now. The instructor encouraged me to stick with it. Now at the end of the semester, I have a totally different outlook of this course. I have a passion for learning business, and it was stimulating for me because it opened up a whole new realm of theories I did not know existed." So the takeaway here is his feedback was, I'm not getting how this really matters to me. And rather than kind of pushing it aside, I really listened to what he had to say and thought about how I could respond to make sure that he was getting his money's worth. Okay, tip number 3, ask clarifying questions. Now, sometimes when somebody's giving you feedback, it may be kind of fuzzy in their own head. Maybe they didn't really sit down and figure out what they wanted to say, how they wanted to say it, and so it might be a little ambiguous in general. So ask those clarifying questions. Get to the root issue, the core issue that the person is raising. This also demonstrates to the person that you're interested in what they have to say, that you really want to understand and respond to their feedback. Finally, it gives you a chance to ask for specific examples. If they're giving you feedback about behavior or process, what you do, how you do your job, how you interact with somebody, by asking for specific examples, it allows you to really understand what exactly they're getting at. And by the way, just between me and you, if they don't have really good examples that kind of exemplify the behavior that they're trying to amend, take it with a grain of salt, okay? We'll talk about this in a moment, but not all feedback is stellar. One of the reasons we ask clarifying questions and look for examples is we want to make sure the person giving the feedback knows what they're talking about. All right, moving on. Okay, tip number 4, respond with grace, not defensively. Now, 2 ways that we kind of become defensive is either by deflecting or dismissing the feedback. And let me show you what I mean by deflecting and dismissing. So in this example, Erica is an HR professional. She's been in the industry for 20 years and she really knows her stuff. Her friend Janet is struggling to find a new job. She's sending out resumes and so forth, but she has not gotten a single call back yet. So Janet has gone to her friend Erica to ask for feedback on her resume. Now, after reading the resume, this is the feedback that Erica has for Janet.
This resume feels very broad and genetic. I don't really get the sense that you're applying for a very specific position. I recommend that you go through the position job description in details and make sure your resume lines up clearly with the job requirement, using the same language, terms, and so forth.
So what would deflection look like? Well, if Janet were trying to deflect anything that Erica had given her, this is how she might respond.
Well, what I was trying to do is be efficient with my time. It would take me forever to rewrite my resume for every individual job posting.
So as you see in this example, the idea of deflection is to kind of ignore the feedback that was offered and explain it away. Now, in this example, Janet, is your objective to be efficient or is it to get a job? Now, obviously it's to get a job, but what Erica is recommending would take a lot of work and maybe she doesn't really want to wrap her mind around that. So she deflects the feedback. Okay, but what about being dismissive? This is what dismissive feedback might look like.
Well, I tried that and it didn't work.
This sort of dismissive behavior, it's never a good idea. What you're essentially communicating to the person offering you the feedback is that they don't know what they're talking about and their advice is useless. That's not exactly what you want to do when somebody's there trying to help you. Now, one thing to bear in mind in all this is, remember, it's actually very difficult for somebody to provide feedback. It puts us in an uncomfortable position, and frankly, unless we really care about the person or care about what they're working on, most of us would just assume avoid the whole feedback thing. So that means that when somebody is willing to sit down and provide us feedback, we should be respectful of that and appreciate their efforts. And so being dismissive or deflecting, that doesn't really work well for us. Okay, tip number 5. If necessary, ask for time to process the feedback. Truth is, some feedback can really sting. And so it may require a little bit extra time for us to wrap our minds around it emotionally. That's not going to happen in a quick face-to-face meeting in a conference room over by the side 10 minutes before the next meeting. We may need to kind of say time out, ask for a little bit of time to process this, reschedule the meeting for tomorrow so we can get ourselves in a better headspace to properly receive, process, and act upon the feedback. Okay, now tip number 6. Summarize what you've heard. By doing this, we are able to make sure that we've really heard and understand everything the person has to say, that we get the key elements, and that we kind of have a plan in place for what to do going forward. It also communicates to the sender of the feedback that I've heard you, I respect what you have to say, and I appreciate the time and energy that you've put into this conversation. And that takes me to tip number 7. Show appreciation. Remember, there's nothing that says this person has to provide the feedback. In fact, what's in it for them? So if somebody is going to step outside their comfort zone and take the time to give us tips and tricks and guidance on how we can improve our performance, we need to be appreciative of this. Also, by being appreciative, it sends the message that we're open to this kind of feedback, and if in the future they see anything else that we can improve, please come to us. They'll know that they're in a safe place when they're giving us coaching and guidance. All right, finally, tip number 8. Corroborate the feedback with others. So the truth is, just because somebody has taken the time to give us this feedback and walk us through the process, doesn't mean it's good feedback. In fact, it might be complete garbage. But even if you think it's garbage, it really pays to kind of pause and say, all right, are there any nuggets in this mud that I can benefit from? One of the ways we can do this is by going to others whom we trust and sharing the feedback with them, asking them to corroborate what this person has said to us, the person who provided the feedback. They might say, yeah, they're totally off base, but they also might say, you know what, okay, they weren't too elegant in the way they delivered it to you, but there are a couple things here you might consider. That's valuable. And so by corroborating the feedback with others, we're able to really make sure that we've identified those key things that truly matter and focus how we improve our performance. All right, those are the 8 tips on how to receive feedback. But don't stop yet, okay? Don't hit stop. What we've talked about here is how to receive face-to-face feedback. In our next video, we're going to talk about how to process electronic feedback, such as emails, customer comments, reviews, things of that nature. So you don't want to miss that. Also, if you think this has been helpful at all, do me a favor and hit the like button. And so there you are. Thanks for joining me today. Go off and use these tips and tricks as you receive feedback throughout your day, throughout your week, month, career, and see if they don't help you. I bet they will. Have a fantastic day. And hey, a shout out to Missy Hassan for doing the voiceover for Erica and Sierra Schiffbauer for doing the voice of Janet. Hey, if you thought this was interesting or learned something, you might want to check out these videos as well. Also, I have a Patreon account, so if you're interested in learning more or how you might be able to support this sort of endeavor, go ahead and take a look at the link in the description below. Have a great day.